Good morning, everybody. I'm going to start this video a little early because I have to go and pick my wife up from the airport around the same time that I'm supposed to record this video. Um, just want to talk for a few minutes today about the last two topics that we are covering inside of Hamlet. First is I'm going to start with faith and religion. The faith and religion play a huge part in this story about a young man who is on a quest to avenge the wrongful death of his father. Now, again, we've talked about medieval notions of religion and also moving into the Renaissance. The main differences there is in medieval times, the Catholic faith was predominantly the main Christian influence throughout Western Europe. And then as we moved into the Renaissance, we start to see the power of the Reformation that took place and started in Germany, starting to propagate out through different regions around Europe. And so we, inside of Shakespearean tragedies specifically, you're going to see that there is a intermingling of Catholic and Protestant traditions that kind of show the melting pot that's taking place between the old way of thinking from the medieval period and then moving into this new way of thinking in the Renaissance period. And so, having said that, I think the first example that you could highlight if you want to talk about that topic is the concept of purgatory. If you remember at the beginning of the play, the whole revenge arc, the spark, as I call it, that creates the conflict that permeates through drama, begins when the ghost of Hamlet's father comes to him and reveals that his death was wrongful and a murder most foul. Now, it's a couple of different avenues you could take here. One, throughout most of the Protestant traditions, especially ones that are more modern, there is no concept of purgatory per se. Most Protestant theologians rejected that notion, that there was a limbo for good people who had passed on, who were no longer here in the physical realm on earth, but were not allowed to move on into heaven because their soul was impure. So they were allowed to stay in this limbo type state. The Protestants pretty much rejected that notion. But I guess what you can see here is there's a little bit of Catholic influence here still left over. Again, the main Protestant Reformation took place in King Henry VIII's time. All right. And so the time in which we're writing this or viewing this production is Queen Elizabeth's time, which is a couple of decades afterwards. So the Reformation was in full swing, but of course, as we know, it takes time for changes in policy and religious and our theology to intermingle its way and permeate throughout a culture. So it's fair to say that Shakespeare, or the pseudonym, the person that used that pseudonym, probably still had a lot of Catholic, or possibly had some Catholic leanings still, in his own mind and in his own probably worldview, because of the nature of the way that Hamlet's father has come back at this point. Now, that's not necessarily to say that Shakespeare himself fully adopted that worldview, but it was one that was considered useful for the play. And so this concept of purgatory, like I said, is mainly a Catholic tradition that is a limbo state. And in this case, I always get the questions, well, if the old king was murdered, wouldn't that allow him to go on? Well, not necessarily, because there could have been some kind of stain upon his status or soul, however you want to identify that, up until the point when his life was taken. Therefore, that would not fully qualify him to move on to the next realm. And therefore, in the need for this soul to find redemption in his mind is through his son. And of course, he's laying this burden on his son because he is no longer able to bring about the change, which is really what purgatory is all about. According to the Catholic tradition, when a soul moves on to purgatory, it's really up to the family members and the close friends of the dear newly departed to pray for the souls of that person to move on, to appeal on his behalf. We call that an intercession. And so in a way, that's what Hamlet's quest is all about. It's acting as an intercession on behalf of his father, but at the same time, it's also a moral crisis for Hamlet himself. Again, we're talking about a deeply Christian, very devout culture. Even in England, probably in Denmark, most people tended to be very devout during this time period. Not saying that they were perfect, but they were more aware of the traditions and the obligations of the faith than most people are today. And therefore, that's one of the reasons why Hamlet, you see at the beginning of the play, after his father gives him this quest to avenge himself. And then as Hamlet is moving through the play, interacting with his mother, interacting with Ophelia, trying to get one up on Claudius so he can expose him for the murderer that he is. Hamlet is swinging back and forth here as guilt starts to plague him. And in fact, there's one scene where he actually contemplates suicide, to be or not to be. That is the question. And again, that long soliloquy is a rationalization that's going on, or in Hamlet's mind, trying to reason whether it's better to stay upon this earth, knowing that the great burden that's laid upon him, or should he just end it at that point? And again, the Christian faith plays heavily into this, because suicide, as you know, is according to, especially in the Catholic faith, a damnable offense. Someone who is guilty of committing suicide in their own life can find their souls eternally damned for denying the will of the Creator in that tradition. And so again, faith and religion is really plaguing, interwoven, not plaguing, but interwoven throughout this whole story. Another example would be Hamlet at the moment where he sees Claudius kneeling at the altar on his way to see his mother. Claudius is by himself, and Claudius is at this point where he realizes that Hamlet is on to him, and the guilt starts to overtake even him. Or that's probably not correct. It's probably not so much guilt as it is fear. Fear that the treachery that he has brought about against his own brother and his nephew and then the kingdom of Denmark, that he is going to be eternally damned once Hamlet finds out, and if Hamlet's able to kill him. And so he's kneeling at the altar, pleading his soul, pleading his case. And Hamlet walks in, and again, this is a young man who is on a quest, given to him by his father. He's been denied his birthright. He has every right, you would think, at this point, to reach out and take Claudius's life. But he knows, again, this is where the faith and religion is interwoven into the play. He knows that if he takes the life of Claudius, who is kneeling in prayer and asking for forgiveness at that point, one, it could absolve Claudius, because at that point, according to the tradition, if he confessed his sins, he should be sinless at that point. Now, that's more of a Protestant tradition than it is Catholic. Of course, in the Catholic faith, it was required that you confess your sins one to another, especially to a priest of the church, whereas in the Protestant tradition, they did away with that requirement. But either way, Claudius at the altar at that point is appealing his case to God. And Hamlet knows that if he takes his life, that somehow, at some way, Claudius could be absolved of his the murder of his brother. And at the same time, Hamlet could be damning his own soul, for taking the life of an innocent at that point. And then the last example that we really want to touch on is this whole nature of incest. Of course, this is indicative in the fact that Gertrude takes the brother of her dead husband, which, according to the Old Testament, and this is held up by Catholic faith, that if a man takes the wife of his dead brother, or if a woman is married to the man or the brother of her dead husband, that is considered to be unclean and incest, because the previous marriage, according to the church, bound those people as one. Therefore, the brother-in-law technically, spiritually becomes the brother. And that's what happens in this case with Gertrude. That is somewhat of a dangerous game also that Shakespeare was playing, because it's in kind of reference to what happened earlier on with Henry VIII, divorcing Catherine of Aragon based on that same argument. That, again, if you remember in the previous lecture, Catherine of Aragon was actually married to Henry VIII's older brother, Arthur, who died unexpectedly. And the church at that point deemed that the marriage was never consummated, so therefore Catherine of Aragon could marry again legally by the church. And of course, Henry VII, not wanting to lose the prestige of having a Spanish princess in his court, decided to marry her off to Henry VIII, younger brother, with papal dispensation. Now, later on, when Henry decided that he no longer wanted to be married to Catherine of Aragon, because she was not able to produce him a living son and heir, he used that argument, that same argument from Leviticus, which damns the soul of someone who commits incest and marries the brother or sibling of a dead spouse. So there again, you've got faith and religion that's totally interwoven within this play, and I'm sure there's other examples as well, but in respect to keep the video short and cut down on the processing time, those are some main key points that you can talk about if you want to write your paper about the topic of faith and religion. Now, the last topic that we're going to talk about is death and decay. Now, of course, death and decay can be seen just like faith and religion, and even the other topics all throughout this play. But there's three instances that I want to really talk about: death and decay in the physical sense. Of course, we have Claudius, not King of Denmark, Hamlet, King Hamlet, the senior, who has been murdered, and his dead ghost, or his ghost, has come back to communicate this ill intent. There's a symbolic reference there to death and decay, but also in the fact that you have so many characters in this play. I think there's more characters that end up dying in this play, Hamlet, than any other Shakespearean play. Considering the fact that it is a tragedy, of course, the hero, the protagonist of the tale, is going to meet some kind of demise, that being Hamlet. And if you do the body count, you're talking about Hamlet, Claudius, Gertrude, Polonius, Ophelia, and Laertes, in addition to Hamlet's father, have all perished at some point in this play, leaving only Horatio and the Prince of Norway, Fortinbras, at the end. So, you know, of course, through the spectacle that happens at the end of the play, where we have this fight scene between Hamlet and Laertes to defend their honor. Of course, Laertes is fighting to defend the honor of his dead father at the hands of Hamlet. And of course, Hamlet is fighting the champion of Claudius in order to one-up him and best him. Little do they know there was poison tips on the sword, and poison was actually used throughout the whole spectacle in that scene. Gertrude ended up drinking from the poison cup, and of course Hamlet forced Claudius, after his mother passed away by accident, he forced Claudius to drink from the same cup. And then, of course, you know, Hamlet ends up being poisoned from a scratch from the sword, and so does Laertes as well. Absolute chaos and turmoil at the end of this play. And of course, that's part of the theme, right? Of how these political alliances, family squabbles, and deceit and usurpation, and denying the true act of succession of the crown. All of these things played a part in bringing about the death and decay that you see within the play. And of course, that's real life. I mean, that's what Shakespeare is doing here. He's portraying what it was like, especially during his time period and what came before, what it was like to live in that environment, in that climate, where these political and religious and family squabbles ended up costing the lives of not only themselves, but everyone around them. You can see that in the Wars of the Roses. Let's also talk about death and decay in here in the mental sense, because there's a lot of question about Hamlet's state of mind in this play. Is he mad? Is he not mad? And I've read arguments to valid arguments of academic opinion on both sides. I'm not a scholar in this time period. Mine's more of an ancient mythology. That's my core concentration, but I have prepped enough for this class in order to read the two sides of the arguments, and I can see both sides, where Hamlet is faking a mental illness in order to catch everyone that he's against here, all the antagonists, off guard, in order for him to overcome them. But at the same time, I can see the other side, and the fact that Hamlet is contemplating suicide at one point. That does indicate that there's a lot of mental stress that's going on, a lot of mental anguish, as existential contemplation about the nature of who he is and his place in the universe. And I mean, there's a lot of examples throughout this whole play, not only within him, but also within his love interest, Ophelia. Look at what happens with her. The mental torture and anguish from being rejected by her love, and then the sudden death of her father just pushed her over to the edge, to the point to where she just couldn't take life anymore. But in addition to that, I think one of the things that we can really look at from a big picture scope, aside from the physical instances of physical death and also mental death in this play, is also the death of the monarchy. Again, in the medieval period, with the church having a firm hold over the culture, and the crown working in tandem with the church in order to maintain a certain cultural flow to the society. In the Renaissance period, you see that breaking down. You see the hierarchy of the king at the top, the nobles and the aristocracy just below him, and then the common people, the merchant class, and in that middle, huge middle layer, and then the peasants, the poor people down at the bottom who couldn't take care of themselves. They had to work land for other people, specifically the aristocracy, in order to make a living. That whole hierarchy, that pyramid, is under attack and is starting to crumble during the Renaissance period. And it's a main result of changes throughout the societies in Western Europe during this time, not only from a religious context, throwing away the old traditions as far as faith, but also the rise of the merchant class, becoming very, very wealthy and very, very powerful. Even the peasants, the lower class people, had more bargaining power during this period, mainly due to a drop in the population after the Black Plague. You just start to see the balance of power shift to the point to where in the early medieval period, people saw the need for monarchy and embrace the need for monarchy because they felt that it was a physical representation of the hierarchy in the church, with God being at the top and the priests administering the temporal realm in his stead. That all of that is changing during the Renaissance period. So you really start to see a death and decay of the old order, the old monarchical order of the medieval period, moving into the Renaissance period, which really springboards the Age of Reason, where all of that starts to crumble at a rapid rate. Again, the Age of Reason, which takes place after the Renaissance period, is that period in history where you get the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the English Civil Wars, where they actually overthrew the monarchies for a period of time. That hold, that religious hold, that spiritual hold, that and even that temporal hold that the old order had on society, every facet of society, for over 1,000, almost 2,000 years, is starting to crumble at that point. And Hamlet is kind of a prelude to all of that, because I think Shakespeare was smart enough to see, understanding history as well as he did, he almost kind of foreshadowed what was coming to pass, and how fragile the old traditions and the old institutions really were in this new age of learning and exploration and advancement. He kind of foreshadowed a lot of that death and decay that was what was going on with the old order. So there you go. We've got a full range of topics for you to write your paper on. Again, we talked about the revenge arc, the act of succession. We've talked about Hamlet's relationship with women, and now we have kind of come full circle and tied it all up with the overarching themes of death and decay and faith and religion that are interwoven throughout Act 1 all the way through Act 5 of Hamlet. So there you go. There you have it. I think I've given you some big picture stuff to think about. Again, with an intro to literature course like this, I tend not to deep dive into the plays that much, because a lot of times students are lost in the monotony, and they really don't see the connection to the big picture. So I like to talk about big picture concepts, things where you can listen to me and then go back and either watch the play again for the second or third time, or read some passages and go like, wow, okay, yeah, that's where I want to go with this. Because at the end of the day, really, this comp class is about writing better through reading, not necessarily a literary analysis class. We just use literary analysis in order to help facilitate better writing. So there you go. That's the last lecture I'm going to give on the assigned readings. So for the online class, this will be your last video interaction with me. Unless you have any questions or comments or feedback that you send me either through text, or not text, but email, or through the message board on Blackboard. Send me your questions, send me your comments, your feedback, and then I can use that possibly to do another video to help out the rest of the class. And then my day class, thank you for being flexible this week. I know it was inconvenient, but I will see you back in the classroom next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, unless unless the virus shuts everything down, which I was afraid of this. I knew this was coming, and looks like it's happening. So again, for both classes, please reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you need some feedback from me. And please be mindful that the paper deadlines are rapidly approaching. So if you have outstanding assignments, late assignments, please do your best to get those in on time. If not, I will have to count a 0 for all missed assignments. Okay. All right. Anyway, have a great weekend. Again, reach out to me if you need any help. I'll be here, and I will talk to you again real soon. Thank you.